She shared an Uber with a stranger during a storm, unaware he was the city's most feared Mafia boss. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. The rain hammered against the windshield in relentless bursts, the kind that made everything look like a blur of shadows. The streets of Manhattan were eerily empty for a Friday night, with most people probably staying in, avoiding the storm. Olivia was no different. Her shift at the restaurant had been longer than expected, and the storm was a welcome excuse to escape the bustle of the city. She opened the Uber app, requested a ride, and within minutes, a black car pulled up to the curb. As she climbed in, the driver didn't say a word, just nodded slightly, his eyes still focused on the road. He was a tall man, with dark features, wearing a black suit that looked too expensive for someone driving a taxi, even in this city. Olivia didn't think much of it. She was tired, and all she wanted was to get home, to her small apartment in Queens, away from the noise of the city. The car pulled away from the curb, and as the rain began to fall harder, the city lights blurred into a cascade of neon reflections on the wet pavement. The world outside seemed distant, like a bad dream she was desperately trying to wake up from. Where are we headed? The driver's voice broke the silence, low and steady. Olivia turned her head toward him, caught off guard. He hadn't said a word since she entered the car. Queens. You know, just outside the city, she replied, her voice slightly strained from exhaustion. The man nodded, still not offering any further conversation. He wasn't unfriendly, but there was something about him that made Olivia uneasy. She couldn't pinpoint what it was. Maybe it was the way he sat so still, or how his eyes never seemed to leave the rearview mirror, scanning the streets behind them as if he was waiting for something, or someone. The car glided through the rain, the storm becoming more violent by the minute. Olivia watched the droplets trickle down the window, her mind wandering. She was lost in her thoughts, thinking about her upcoming days off, when a sudden flash of headlights behind them caught her attention. Another car, a sleek black SUV, was tailing them closely. At first, she thought nothing of it, but as the car followed them for several blocks, her unease grew. She glanced in the rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of the SUV's dark, tinted windows. It seemed like the car was sticking to them, moving whenever they did. It felt odd. She looked at her driver, who seemed completely unaware of the pursuit. That's when Olivia noticed something strange. He wasn't paying attention to the road as much as he had been before. Instead, his eyes were flicking between the rearview mirror and the side mirrors. That's when the realization hit her. Something was wrong. "Excuse me, is everything okay?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. The man's eyes flicked to her for a brief moment, just a flash, before he turned his gaze back to the road. "Everything's fine," he replied smoothly, though there was something about his voice that sent a chill down Olivia's spine. The SUV didn't let up. It was still right there, just a few car lengths behind them. Olivia's heart began to race. What was going on? She could feel her palms start to sweat, her mind running through possible scenarios. Was she being followed? Was it just a coincidence? She was about to ask the driver again when, without warning, the black SUV swerved and pulled up alongside their car, blocking their path. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. The window on the passenger side of the SUV rolled down slowly, and a tall man in a black suit leaned out, his gaze meeting Olivia's through the window. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, the man spoke in a voice that was smooth but laced with authority. "You're in the wrong place, sweetheart," he said, his eyes cold as ice. Olivia's stomach dropped. She had no idea what was happening, but she knew it wasn't good. The man in the SUV didn't speak further, just watched her with a look that made her feel like prey. Before she could say anything, the black car in front of her, the Uber driver, began to slow. The man turned his head, his expression unreadable. "Don't worry. Everything is under control," he murmured. But Olivia felt anything but in control. The rain outside seemed to intensify, pounding harder against the windows, as if it was reflecting the chaos she was beginning to feel inside. She opened her mouth to ask more questions, but before the words could form, the Uber driver turned to her, his cold eyes locking with hers. You don't need to know what's happening, Olivia. Just stay quiet, he said, his voice low, almost menacing. Olivia froze, her heart racing. What had she gotten herself into? Who was this man, really? And why had he been so quiet the entire ride? The storm outside continued to rage, but in that moment, Olivia realized something far more dangerous was brewing in the silence between them. And she was caught right in the middle of it. Olivia felt the car slow down, the tension in the air thickening with each passing second. The rain seemed to pound harder against the windows, its sound becoming deafening in the silence that hung between her and the driver. Her heart raced as the man in the black SUV continued to watch her through the side mirror, his cold, unblinking eyes never leaving her face. The stranger, her driver, finally broke the silence. It's fine, he said in a voice that was calm but held a note of finality. Don't worry about it. Olivia didn't know what to believe anymore. She had been trying to make sense of everything from the moment she had gotten into this car, but the more she thought about it, the more confused and scared she became. What had she stumbled into? Who were these people? Her mind was racing, her thoughts tangled in a web of fear and uncertainty. The man's words barely reassured her. They weren't just a random driver anymore. Something about him, the way he moved, the way he held himself, screamed that he was more than just a simple Uber driver. She opened her mouth to ask him again who he was and what was going on, but the words caught in her throat. She couldn't bring herself to speak, not with the cold eyes of the man in the SUV still staring at her from behind. The tension in the car was unbearable, and she could feel her palms starting to sweat. The streets outside were now deserted, the usual hum of the city's nightlife drowned out by the storm. There was a sense of isolation that seeped into the car, as if they had entered a different world altogether. The black SUV remained close behind, and Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that they were being followed. The driver made a sharp turn, taking a side street that led them away from the city's main roads. Olivia glanced out the window, her stomach twisting in knots. Where were they going? And why was this happening to her? Don't worry, the driver said again, his voice soft but firm. You're safe, but we need to move quickly. Olivia's eyes widened. Safe? How could she be safe when she had no idea where she was or what was going on? She opened her mouth to ask him where they were going, but before she could say anything, the car came to a sudden stop. The driver turned off the engine, plunging them into darkness. For a moment, everything was still. Olivia's pulse pounded in her ears as she sat frozen, unsure of what to do next. She couldn't move. She couldn't speak. The silence was suffocating. Then, without a word, the driver got out of the car and opened her door. Olivia hesitated, her body stiff with fear. Come with me, he said simply, his tone leaving no room for argument. Now, she couldn't find her voice to protest. Her mind was too foggy, and her body felt heavy with dread. Hesitantly, she stepped out of the car, her feet sinking into the wet pavement. The rain had let up slightly, but the chill in the air still made her shiver. She looked around, but there was nothing familiar. Only the shadowy outline of buildings and the dim glow of streetlights in the distance. The man from the SUV was standing a few feet away, his gaze still locked on her. His eyes were sharp, assessing her every movement, like a predator watching its prey. Where are we? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. You don't need to know, the driver replied, his voice cold and final. He gestured for her to follow him, and though every instinct told her to run, Olivia's legs refused to move. She was paralyzed, caught in this strange world that had suddenly become her reality. As they walked, the air felt heavier, thicker, as if something was about to happen. The driver led her toward an imposing building at the end of the street, the door guarded by two men in dark suits. They nodded respectfully to the driver, their eyes never leaving Olivia. The atmosphere was suffocating, as though the walls of the city were closing in on her. Who are these people? Olivia asked, her voice shaking. People who can make your life very easy or very difficult. The driver answered without turning around. His words hung in the air like a threat, and Olivia could feel the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. They entered the building, and Olivia couldn't help but feel like she was walking deeper into a trap. The hallway was dimly lit, the only sound the soft click of their footsteps on the marble floor. The driver led her to a door at the end of the hall, and without a word, he opened it, revealing a luxurious office. It was immaculate, decorated with rich furniture and dark wood paneling. At the desk sat a man, his back to them, but Olivia could feel his presence the moment she entered the room. This was no ordinary man. She knew that without even having to see his face. The man turned slowly in his chair, and Olivia's breath caught in her throat. It was him, the man from the SUV. The man with the cold eyes. He smiled slightly, his expression one of amusement as he studied her. "So, we meet at last," he said, his voice smooth and commanding. "I've been watching you for some time, Olivia." Olivia's heart skipped a beat. Watching her? What did he mean by that? And why had he been following her? What was going on? She couldn't make sense of any of this, but one thing was clear. Her life had just taken a very dangerous turn. Olivia stood frozen in the doorway of the luxurious office, her heart pounding in her chest. The man in front of her, the one with the cold, calculating eyes, was staring at her as though she were a puzzle he was trying to solve. The smile on his lips was small, but it was filled with something Olivia couldn't quite place. Amusement, perhaps, or something darker. She tried to steady her breathing, but the air in the room felt thick, oppressive. "I know this must be a lot to take in," he said, his voice smooth like velvet. "But I promise, you're in safe hands." Safe hands. Olivia's mind raced as she tried to process everything that had happened in the last few hours. She had been caught in a storm, then gotten into an Uber with a stranger who turned out to be the most dangerous man she'd ever met. Now, she was standing in his office, unsure of what he wanted from her. "What do you want from me?" Olivia asked, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to keep it steady. The man leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving her. He steepled his fingers, as if contemplating her question carefully before he answered. "I want nothing from you, Olivia. I simply want to make sure that you stay safe," he said. His words were calm, almost too calm, and Olivia's gut twisted with suspicion. "Safe? From what?" she demanded, her voice rising slightly. The man's gaze hardened, just for a moment. "From people who would do you harm if they knew what you overheard." He stood up then, walking slowly around his desk until he was only a few feet from her. Olivia felt her breath catch in her throat as he came closer, his presence imposing. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and every inch of him radiated power and control. "You overheard something you weren't supposed to, Olivia. And now, you're caught in something much bigger than you could have imagined." Olivia stepped back, her head spinning. "I didn't mean to hear anything," she said, her voice shaking. "I didn't even know what they were talking about." The man tilted his head slightly, his gaze softening, but there was no warmth in it. "I believe you," he said quietly, "but that doesn't change the fact that you heard it. And now, you're in danger." Olivia's heart hammered in her chest. "Danger? What kind of danger?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man smiled again, but this time it didn't feel reassuring. "The kind of danger that comes from knowing too much about people like me," he said, his voice low and filled with menace. "People who don't take kindly to their secrets being overheard." The room felt smaller as Olivia's mind tried to catch up with his words. She had been thrown into a world she didn't understand, a world of power and danger, and she didn't know if she could get out of it. The man took a step closer to her, his expression serious now. "I'm giving you a choice, Olivia," he said. "You can leave, go back to your life, and pretend this never happened. But you need to understand that if you do, you'll be putting yourself at risk. You'll be exposing yourself to people who won't hesitate to make sure you never speak of this again." Olivia's legs felt like jelly. She couldn't think straight. She hadn't asked for any of this. All she had wanted was to get home from a long shift, away from the storm, and now she was here, trapped in a situation she didn't know how to escape. "Or," the man continued, his voice more intense, "you can stay, and I will make sure no one comes after you. I will protect you." Olivia looked up at him, her mind racing. "Protect me? From who?" The man's expression softened for a moment, but there was no mistaking the gravity in his eyes. "From people who would do anything to silence you. From the people I deal with. From my enemies." He paused for a moment, as if letting his words sink in. "You're not just anyone, Olivia. You're involved now, whether you like it or not." Olivia shook her head, her mind reeling. "I don't want any part of this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The man studied her for a long moment, his gaze piercing. "I didn't ask you to want it, Olivia, but you're already in the middle of it. And if you want to survive, you'll have to accept that." He stepped back, crossing his arms over his chest as he regarded her with cold, calculating eyes. You can't leave now. Not until I know you're safe. You'll stay here with me, under my protection. And we'll figure this out together. Olivia's stomach twisted in knots as the realization hit her. She was trapped. There was no escaping this. The man had made it clear that she was caught up in something far bigger than she could ever have imagined. And now she had to figure out how to survive in this dangerous world she had stumbled into. She had no choice but to stay with him. For now, at least. The man's eyes softened slightly as he saw the hesitation in her expression. Don't worry, he said again, his voice calm. I'll make sure nothing happens to you. But remember, Olivia, this is your only chance. If you leave, there's no turning back. Olivia swallowed hard, her heart racing. She had never felt more uncertain in her life. But as the man in front of her waited for her response, she knew one thing for sure. She was no longer in control of her own fate. She had just stepped into a world she couldn't escape, and now she had to learn how to survive in it. Olivia stood in the grand office, her legs feeling as though they might give way beneath her at any moment. The man, the one who had seemed so calm, so in control, now stood before her, his gaze piercing and unwavering. The weight of his words hung in the air like a thick fog that she couldn't escape. You've been dragged into something bigger than you can understand, Olivia, he said again, his voice low and controlled, though the intensity behind it made her skin prickle. She wanted to protest, to demand answers, but the fear that had taken hold of her mouth and heart kept her silent. How had her simple, ordinary life become entangled in this mess? Just hours ago, she was trying to make it home through the storm, never imagining that by stepping into an Uber, she would be stepping into a world of danger and deceit. She thought she could still walk away, but now, every time she even considered running, the words the man had spoken echoed in her mind. You can't leave. Not now. The silence in the room felt suffocating. Olivia glanced around, her eyes catching on the expensive furnishings, the rich, dark wood of the desk, the leather chairs, the soft lighting that seemed to highlight the man's every movement. But it wasn't the room that scared her. It was him. He was the kind of person who didn't need to raise his voice, yet every word he spoke held weight, as if it were a command that couldn't be ignored. His presence alone filled the space, and Olivia felt small in comparison. I didn't ask for any of this, she finally managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. The man didn't immediately respond. Instead, he moved across the room to a small bar, pouring himself a drink. The clink of the glass was the only sound in the room. Olivia's eyes followed him, her mind racing. Who was this man? Why had he taken an interest in her? Was she truly in danger, or was this just some twisted game to him? She couldn't make sense of it. He returned to his seat, his eyes locked on hers as he took a slow sip of the drink. You didn't ask for it, no? But you're involved now. There's no going back. His voice was almost regretful, but the words were clear. Olivia didn't know what to say. She couldn't deny what was happening. It was like a slow-motion car crash, and all she could do was watch as the situation got worse by the second. The man's eyes softened for just a moment, but the intensity in them never wavered. I'll protect you, Olivia. But you need to understand that you're in this now. You know too much. His words were chilling. I don't want your protection, she said, her voice shaking with a mix of fear and anger. She wanted to yell, to demand to leave, to escape this nightmare. But part of her knew that wasn't an option anymore. The man leaned forward, his elbows resting on the desk as he studied her. You don't get to make that choice. Not anymore, he said, his tone cold, though there was a flicker of something else behind his eyes, something that almost looked like sympathy. You think you can walk away from this? He gestured to the office around them, the opulence, the power, the danger. You've already seen too much. Heard things you weren't supposed to hear. There's no turning back. Olivia felt her breath catch in her throat. The reality of her situation was starting to sink in. She wasn't just some innocent bystander who had gotten caught in a moment of bad luck. She was now tied to something far more dangerous, something that she didn't understand. She had no choice but to play along. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice barely audible. The man studied her for a long moment, as if weighing her every word. Then, finally, he spoke again. I want you to stay. I want you to be a part of this world. My world. You'll be safe here, under my protection. The words stung, and Olivia felt a wave of nausea rise in her chest. She didn't want to be here, didn't want any part of his world. But at the same time, she couldn't ignore the reality of what he was saying. She had nowhere else to go. She had no family left, no one to turn to. She had no choice but to stay, to endure whatever came next. I don't have a choice, do I? She asked, her voice flat. The man smiled slightly, though there was no warmth in it. No, you don't. The silence stretched on between them, both of them locked in a standoff, neither willing to break the tension. Olivia's mind was still spinning, but there was one thing she was certain of now. She had just stepped into a world that would change her forever, whether she was ready for it or not. She had to decide if she was going to fight, to resist, or if she was going to accept her fate and learn how to survive in the chaos that had just become her reality. The man stood up again, walking slowly toward her. I'll give you time to think, he said. But remember, Olivia, you're in this now. You're mine. His words sent a shiver down her spine. She had no idea what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure. She was no longer in control of her life. And the man in front of her, this Mafia boss, held all the power. Olivia was at his mercy, and she had no idea how far he would go to protect his secrets, or how far he would go to make sure she stayed in his world. Olivia sat in the room, the weight of the silence pressing down on her. The man had left her alone for a few minutes, but she could still feel his presence lingering in the air. Every time she tried to focus on something else, her mind would circle back to him. His cold eyes, the power he exuded, the way he had claimed that she belonged to his world. Now, she didn't know what to think anymore. Just hours ago, she had been a normal woman, trying to make it through her day, catching an Uber to escape the storm. Now she was caught in a web of danger and deceit that she couldn't escape, and worse, she had no idea what the consequences would be if she tried. Her body felt heavy, like she was trapped in quicksand, each movement taking more effort than the last. But she couldn't sit here forever, lost in her thoughts. She needed to act. There had to be something she could do, right? But the truth was, she didn't even know where to start. She glanced around the room again, her eyes drifting over the dark wood furniture, the soft lighting, the quiet luxury of the space. It was a far cry from the life she had known, the life she had built on her own. She had worked hard to get where she was, but now it felt like it was all slipping away. She stood up, her legs unsteady, and walked over to the window. The rain had let up slightly, but the city outside was still soaked, the streets glistening under the dim lights of the street lamps. It was a beautiful view, one that felt so distant now, as though it belonged to someone else. As she stared out into the night, the door to the office opened, and he walked in. The man who had turned her world upside down. His presence filled the room, and Olivia couldn't help but tense at the sight of him. He looked the same, calm, controlled, as if nothing could disturb the world he had created. I see you're getting comfortable, he said, his voice low and steady. Olivia turned to face him, her heart hammering in her chest. Comfortable? She repeated, her voice tight. How can I be comfortable when I don't even know what's happening? The man took a step closer, his gaze never leaving hers. I understand this is a lot for you, he said, his tone almost gentle, though it held an edge. But you'll have to trust me if you want to get through this. Trust you? Olivia echoed, disbelief in her voice. Why would I trust you? You're a stranger, and I have no idea what you want from me. The man didn't seem offended by her words. Instead, he simply watched her, his expression unreadable. I'm not asking you to trust me yet, he said. I'm asking you to trust the situation you're in. You're caught up in something now, Olivia. There's no going back. And the sooner you accept that, the easier it will be for both of us. Olivia's mind reeled as she tried to understand what he was saying. She had heard those words before, but they felt like they were meant for someone else, not her. She wasn't a part of his world, not really. She had just overheard something by accident. But now it seemed like there was no escaping the consequences. What do you want from me? She asked again, her voice shaking. I want you to stay, he replied simply. I want you to understand that I will protect you. I want you to be part of this, part of what I'm building. You don't have to like it, but you do have to accept it. His words sent a chill down her spine. She didn't want to be a part of anything he was building. She didn't want to be involved in whatever dangerous world he was a part of. She just wanted to go home, to forget this whole night ever happened. But deep down, she knew that wasn't going to happen. She was already too far gone. I don't belong here, Olivia said softly, looking down at her hands. This isn't my world. The man was silent for a long moment, watching her carefully. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, but still filled with authority. "It is now," he said. "You've crossed the line, Olivia. There's no going back to your old life." She looked up at him, her heart sinking. She had known, deep down, that this was true. But hearing him say it out loud made it all the more real. "What am I supposed to do?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. "You'll stay here for now," he said, his gaze hardening again. "I'll make sure you're safe. And when the time is right, you'll be ready for what comes next." Olivia's stomach churned at the thought of what that could mean. She didn't want to be a part of whatever he had planned. But as she looked into his eyes, she knew there was no escaping it. She had already been dragged into this world, and there was no way out. "I don't have a choice, do I?" she asked, her voice flat. The man smiled, though there was no warmth in it. "No," he said, "you don't." Olivia felt the weight of his words settle over her like a heavy blanket, smothering any hope she had left. She was stuck in this world now, and the man standing before her was the one holding the strings. Her heart sank as she realized the truth. She had no choice but to stay and face whatever this man had planned for her. And as much as she wanted to fight, she knew that she didn't stand a chance against the power he held. The next few days were a blur for Olivia. She tried to adjust to the new reality she had been thrust into, but every time she thought about leaving, the cold, calculating eyes of the man who had dragged her into this world came back to her. She had no choice but to stay, at least for now. It wasn't just the threats he made, it was the way he controlled everything around her. She was trapped. The room she was staying in was luxurious, much nicer than any place she had ever been. But it felt like a gilded cage. Olivia spent most of her time pacing the room, her mind racing with thoughts of escape, but the weight of the situation pressed down on her every time she tried to form a plan. There was no way out. The man had made sure of that. She didn't know his name. He never introduced himself, and he never said much beyond a few words here and there. But she could feel the power radiating from him. She knew who he was, though. The man who ruled the city from the shadows. The one everyone feared. The one who controlled everything. His presence was always felt, even when he wasn't physically there. Every time she left the room, his eyes seemed to follow her, his influence hanging over her like a storm cloud. And then, there was the matter of the black SUV that had been following her. It was always there, waiting. The driver, a man she had never spoken to, was always a few steps behind, keeping her in check, making sure she didn't do anything stupid. Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that every move she made was being monitored. She wasn't free. She hadn't been free since that first ride. As the days went on, she grew more accustomed to the strange rhythm of this new life. She stayed in the room, only leaving when she absolutely had to. The man never forced her to do anything, but she could feel the pressure mounting. Every time she tried to get away, he was there. His men would show up at the door, giving her no choice but to stay. "You don't belong out there anymore," he had said once, his voice low and menacing. "The world you knew is gone. You're mine now." The words echoed in her mind, and Olivia couldn't help but wonder if she had made a terrible mistake by ever stepping into that Uber. She should have known better. She should have trusted her instincts, but now she was here, caught in a world of power and danger, with no way out. One evening, she was sitting by the window, staring out at the dark city below, when the door to her room opened. She turned to see the man standing there, his tall figure framed by the doorway. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was thick, filled with unspoken tension. "Come with me," he said finally, his voice commanding. Olivia stood up slowly, unsure of what to expect. She had learned not to question him, not to argue. There was no point. He would always get his way. She followed him down the hallway, her heart pounding in her chest. She had no idea where they were going, but she knew it wouldn't matter. The moment she stepped out of the room, she was his again. The man led her down the hall to a small elevator that took them down to the lower levels of the building. It was a place Olivia had never been before, and the closer they got to the bottom, the more uneasy she felt. She could hear the low hum of machines, the muffled sounds of voices in the distance. It was clear that this was a place she was not meant to see. The elevator doors opened to a dark hallway, the walls lined with heavy doors that looked like they led to offices or storage rooms. At the end of the hall was a large steel door, and when the man approached, one of the guards stepped forward, nodding silently as he opened it. Inside, Olivia's eyes went wide with shock. The room was filled with monitors, screens flashing with information, maps, and images of people she didn't recognize. It was a command center, the heart of his empire. She had seen things like this in movies, but never in real life. This was his world. "What is this?" Olivia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "This is where I watch everything," he said. "This is where I know everything about everyone." Olivia swallowed hard. The weight of his words sank in. This man controlled not just the city, but everything in it. "And now you're a part of it," he added, his voice softer, almost as if he were explaining something to a child. Olivia looked around the room, feeling small, insignificant in this vast, impersonal space. She wasn't sure if she was more scared of the man or the world he had created. "I don't belong here," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm not one of you." He stepped closer, his gaze intense. "You are now," he replied, his voice low. "You're mine." His words sent a shiver down her spine. She had no choice, no escape. She was part of his world now, whether she liked it or not. She had walked into his life by accident, but now, there was no turning back. She could feel the walls closing in around her, and no matter how hard she tried to fight it, she knew one thing. She was trapped in his world, and he held all the power. Olivia sat in the dark room, staring at the screens, her mind overwhelmed by the reality of the world she had been pulled into. The hum of the computers and the flashing lights from the monitors filled the silence, making her feel more and more isolated with every passing second. She had never imagined that her life would take this turn, that a simple Uber ride through a storm would lead her here, to this underground command center filled with surveillance, power, and dangerous people. Her heart was racing, her thoughts still tangled in confusion. She had heard the man's words clearly. "You are part of this now." But what did that really mean for her? Was she really trapped in his world? Or was there a way out? The man, whose name she still didn't know, had made it clear that there was no escaping. He had shown her the extent of his control over the city, the empire he had built, and the people who feared him. She was no longer an innocent bystander in the world she once knew. She was a part of it now, whether she liked it or not. Olivia glanced at the screens again, her stomach churning as she saw images of people, some of them she recognized, others not, being tracked in real time. He had said he knew everything about everyone. How far did that knowledge go? Did he know everything about her too? Her heart dropped at the thought. What did he know about her past? Her family? Her secrets? As if sensing her discomfort, the man appeared beside her. He stood silently, his gaze fixed on the screens. "You're wondering what I know about you," he said, his voice low and steady, as if reading her thoughts. Olivia didn't answer, but she didn't have to. The silence between them spoke volumes. She couldn't shake the feeling that her every move was being watched, that there were eyes on her at all times. "Don't worry," he continued. "I'm not interested in your personal life. I'm interested in keeping you safe. I told you that already." Olivia felt her pulse quicken at his words. Safe? Was that what this was? Keeping her safe? Or was this just another way of keeping her under control? "Safe?" she echoed, her voice shaky. "You call this safe?" She gestured around at the monitors, the surveillance equipment, the quiet men in dark suits who moved in and out of the room like ghosts. "This isn't safety. This is a prison." The man's eyes softened, but his expression remained unreadable. "It's only a prison if you let it be," he said. "I've given you everything you need to survive in my world. The choice is yours, Olivia. You can choose to fight it, or you can choose to accept it." Olivia felt her heart sink. He was right, in a way. She could try to fight it, to resist everything he was offering. But what would that lead to? What choice did she really have? The world outside these walls seemed so distant now, like a dream she would never wake up from. The longer she stayed here, the more it felt like her old life was slipping away, fading into nothingness. She had no family left. Her friends, if she could even call them that, were a world away. And this man, this dangerous, powerful figure in front of her, was the only person who could protect her. But at what cost? Olivia swallowed hard, trying to steady her nerves. "And if I don't accept this?" she asked quietly, not sure if she really wanted the answer. The man didn't hesitate. "If you don't accept it, you leave. But you won't survive out there. Not with what you know." His words were chilling, but they were also a warning. He wasn't just threatening her. He was telling her the truth. She had no idea who she was dealing with, the people he had connections with, the enemies who would stop at nothing to silence her. Olivia felt the weight of the decision pressed down on her chest. She had no choice but to stay, to trust him. As much as she hated it, she knew she couldn't walk away from this. But the question lingered in her mind. What kind of person was she becoming in this world? Was she losing herself to him? The man's eyes never left her as he spoke again. "I'll make sure you're taken care of," he said. "You'll have everything you need, safety, protection, power. All you have to do is trust me." Olivia clenched her fists at her sides, fighting the urge to scream. "I don't want your protection. I just want my life back," she said, her voice barely a whisper. He stepped closer to her, his presence overwhelming. "Your life is gone, Olivia. You're in my world now. You don't get to choose anymore." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. She had been trying to fight it, to hold on to something she couldn't have. But now, it felt like all her resistance was futile. She had no way out. She was in his world, and there was no going back. Olivia felt a cold shiver run down her spine as the weight of her reality settled in. She wasn't just stuck here. She was trapped, and the man in front of her had the keys to her future. She was part of his world now, whether she liked it or not. And the worst part was, she didn't know if she would ever get out again. The days blurred into each other for Olivia. Each morning, she woke up in a room that felt more like a gilded cage than a place of refuge. The luxurious furnishings, the soft lighting, and the expensive decor were all a reminder of the world she had been thrust into. It wasn't her world. She didn't belong here. But it didn't matter. She had no choice but to stay. He had made sure of that. The man, the one who controlled everything, seemed to be everywhere she went. His presence was always there, looming over her like a shadow. Even when he wasn't physically in the room, she could feel his eyes on her, always watching, always controlling. Olivia had tried to resist, but the longer she stayed in his world, the more she realized how little control she had over her own life. He told her that she was safe here, under his protection, but Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that she was just another piece on his chessboard. One wrong move, and she'd be discarded without a second thought. She spent her days pacing the room, her thoughts racing. She had been caught in a storm, caught in his web of lies, and now she was trapped. There was no way out. She tried to push the thought from her mind, tried to tell herself that she could leave, that there was still hope, but every time she attempted to plan an escape, his men would be there, watching, waiting. There was no escape. She was stuck in his world, and there was nothing she could do about it. He had warned her that if she tried to leave, she would be putting herself in danger, and she believed him. He had the power to make people disappear, and she knew it. Olivia tried to keep her distance from him, but that was easier said than done. He seemed to enjoy watching her squirm, enjoy watching her try to figure out how she could break free from his grip. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being suffocated by his presence. One night, he came to her room again. He didn't knock, just walked in like he owned the place, and she knew that, in his world, he did. "You're still here," he said, his voice low and calm, but there was a note of something else beneath it. Was it concern? No, it wasn't concern. It was control. "Where else would I go?" Olivia replied, trying to keep her voice steady, but her hands were trembling. "I've made it clear that you're safe here," he said, stepping closer to her. "You don't have to worry about anything." "I'm not worried about safety," she shot back, her eyes flashing with frustration. "I'm worried about being trapped." He stopped in his tracks, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Trapped?" he repeated, his voice colder now. "You're not trapped, Olivia. You're here because I want you here. You're safe because I'm protecting you." Olivia swallowed hard, her heart pounding in her chest. "Protecting me from what?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "From everything," he said simply. "From the people who would hurt you if they knew what you knew." Olivia felt a chill run down her spine. She had no idea what he meant by that, but she knew it wasn't good. She had been pulled into something much bigger than she could have imagined, and she didn't know how to get out of it. "I didn't ask for this," she said, her voice cracking. "I didn't ask to be a part of your world." He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. "You're already a part of it," he said softly. "There's no going back." His words sent a shiver down her spine, but she refused to let him see how much they affected her. She wasn't going to let him control her. Not anymore. "I want to leave," she said, her voice firm now. I want to go home. The man's expression didn't change, but there was something in his eyes that made her pause. You don't have a home anymore, he said quietly. You're mine now, Olivia. You belong to me. She froze, the weight of his words hitting her like a ton of bricks. She had known, deep down, that this was where it was all heading, but hearing him say it out loud made it feel like a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. I don't belong to you, she said, her voice shaking, but she refused to let him see her fear. You can't own me. I don't need to own you, he said, his voice soft but filled with an undeniable force. You already belong to me, whether you like it or not. Olivia felt the tears threatening to spill, but she refused to let him see her break. I won't stay here, she said, her voice full of determination. I'll find a way out. I don't care what you say. The man smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of someone who had already won, someone who knew that no matter how hard she fought, she would never escape. We'll see about that, he said softly. Olivia didn't know what he meant by that, but she knew one thing for sure. She was trapped in his world now, and there was no escape. The reality of her situation hit her harder than ever. She had no choice but to play by his rules, but she wasn't sure how much longer she could keep pretending that she was okay with being his prisoner. Olivia's mind raced as she sat in the luxurious, yet suffocatingly silent room. The weight of the man's words echoed in her ears. You're mine now. She had tried to fight it, to convince herself that she could find a way out, but each passing day only confirmed what she had been too afraid to admit. There was no escape from the life he had thrust her into. As the days turned into weeks, Olivia grew more accustomed to the cold, controlling presence of the man who ruled over this world. He had a way of making her feel both invisible and exposed at the same time. No matter where she went, he always seemed to know what she was doing, what she was thinking, even before she did. It was as if she were being slowly suffocated, trapped in a world of surveillance, manipulation, and power that she couldn't escape. She wasn't just a bystander anymore. She was a pawn in his game, and she had no choice but to play by his rules. Every conversation, every glance, was a reminder of that. The man, whose name she still didn't know, had given her everything: protection, luxury, and security. But with each passing day, she wondered how much of herself she would lose in the process. Her life, her identity, her very sense of self seemed to be slipping through her fingers. She spent her days pacing the cold marble floors of the penthouse, staring out of the windows that overlooked the city she once knew so well. The lights of the skyline glimmered, but they felt so far away now. She no longer belonged to that world. She belonged to him. It was inescapable. The first time she tried to walk out, the security guards were there before she could even reach the door. They didn't need to say anything. Their eyes told her everything she needed to know. She had no place outside these walls anymore. As much as she hated to admit it, the man had made sure of that. One evening, as the sun began to set, casting an orange glow over the city, he appeared in the doorway of the room where Olivia had been sitting. His presence filled the space, his shadow looming over her like a dark cloud. Olivia looked up, her stomach tightening. It's time for you to meet the others, he said, his voice cold and commanding. Olivia's heart skipped a beat. Others, she repeated, unsure of what he meant. He stepped closer, his eyes locking onto hers. Those who are part of my world, he explained, his tone no longer harsh, but almost patient. You need to understand the role you'll play in this. There's no turning back now. Olivia's stomach churned. She had no idea what he was talking about, but she knew she wasn't ready for whatever he was about to show her. She wanted to run, to leave, but she had no power here. Come with me, he said, turning toward the door. Olivia followed him, her legs heavy with dread. As they walked through the halls, she couldn't help but feel like a prisoner, like she was walking deeper into a cage she couldn't escape from. They descended to the lower levels of the building, where Olivia had never been before. The air felt colder here, and the silence was broken only by the sound of their footsteps. The man led her down a hallway, stopping at a large door that was guarded by two men. They nodded at the man, stepping aside to allow them to pass. Olivia's heart pounded as they entered the room. The space was dimly lit, filled with monitors and high-tech equipment. It looked like a command center, and for the first time since she had arrived, Olivia felt a real sense of fear. What is this? she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked toward a large screen and activated it. On the screen were maps of the city, marked with various locations and movements. There were photographs, too, of people, of places. Everything was being watched, tracked. "This is where everything comes together," he said, turning to face her. "This is how I control everything. This is how I know everything." Olivia felt a wave of nausea wash over her. She had seen movies like this, watched documentaries about the power of organized crime, but to be standing in the middle of it, to see it all so clearly, was overwhelming. "You're part of this now, Olivia," the man continued. "You'll have your place, your role. And if you stay, you'll be safe." Safe. It was the same word he always used. But what did safety mean in a world like this? Safety meant submission. Safety meant living under his thumb, playing by his rules. "You don't have to do anything right now," he said, as if reading her thoughts. "But you'll learn. You'll understand." Olivia didn't want to understand. She didn't want to be a part of this world. But the truth was, she already was. There was no turning back. The man took a step closer to her, his presence overpowering. "I'm giving you a choice, Olivia," he said softly. "You can stay here and be a part of this, or you can leave. But if you leave, you won't survive. And I won't protect you." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Olivia's chest tightened as she looked at him. There was no way out. She was trapped in his world, and no matter how much she fought it, she knew there was no escaping the hold he had over her. "What's it going to be?" he asked, his eyes searching hers. Olivia swallowed hard. She had no choice. She was his now. Olivia stood in the center of the cold, high-tech command center, her heart pounding in her chest as the man's words echoed in her ears. "You're part of this now, Olivia." She wanted to scream, to run, but she didn't have the strength. She had already known the truth deep down. The moment she had gotten into the Uber, her life had changed. But this world of secrets, surveillance, and cold, calculated power, was nothing she could have prepared for. "You'll learn how it works," he continued, his voice calm and commanding. "You'll be trained. You'll understand your place here." Olivia looked at him, her mind swimming with questions, fear, and a growing sense of hopelessness. How could she possibly fit into this world? How could she trust him, this man who had just stolen her life away? He had given her no choice but to stay, to accept his world, and she hated him for it. But more than that, she hated herself for being unable to escape. "What do you want from me?" Olivia finally managed to say, her voice hoarse. "I've already told you," he replied, his eyes never leaving her. "I want you to stay and learn. I want you to be a part of this." She wanted to refuse, to fight, but she knew it was pointless. He was right. There was no escaping. And deep down, she knew she didn't want to run anymore. She had nowhere to go. Her old life was gone. The man's eyes softened for a moment, as if he was studying her, trying to read her thoughts. "I know this is hard for you," he said, his voice unexpectedly gentle. "But you'll come to understand why this is necessary." Olivia swallowed hard. "Necessary?" she repeated. "What's necessary about this? About controlling everything? About watching people like they're nothing but pawns in your game?" His expression didn't falter. "It's not about control," he said, his voice steady and unwavering. "It's about survival. It's about power. It's about knowing who your enemies are before they even know who you are." She shook her head, struggling to understand him. "This isn't survival. This is a prison." The man took a step closer to her, and she instinctively took a step back, though there was nowhere to go. "This is your new life, Olivia. There is no prison here. There's only protection. I've already given you the choice." She felt the weight of his words pressing down on her. He was right. She had no choice anymore. She was trapped in this world, bound by the secrets he held over her. "And if I refuse?" she asked, her voice small, almost pleading. "You don't refuse," he said, his voice cold, the edge returning. "If you refuse, you'll lose everything. You'll be exposed. You'll be hunted. But if you stay, I'll protect you. No one will harm you. But you must understand, you are mine now." His words rang in her ears, louder than any warning. She wanted to fight him, to push back, but she knew it wouldn't work. She had no power in this world. She was a nobody, and he held all the cards. Olivia was silent, feeling the weight of the decision hanging over her. She had been forced into his world, whether she liked it or not. And now, There was no escaping. There was nothing she could do but accept it. You'll learn to live in this world, the man said, his voice taking on a more authoritative tone. You'll be trained. You'll understand how we protect ourselves, how we protect what's ours. You'll know who to trust and who to avoid. He turned, walking toward one of the monitors and tapping a few keys. The screen flickered to life, showing various images of people, locations, and activities that Olivia didn't fully understand. This is how we control the city, he continued, his tone matter of fact. These are the people who run everything. They have no idea what's coming. Olivia looked at the screen, her mind racing. It was like watching a movie, but this was her reality now. This was the world she was a part of. And for the first time, she realized how far-reaching his power truly was. He wasn't just some mob boss. He was the puppet master, pulling the strings behind the scenes, orchestrating everything from the shadows. I won't be like them, Olivia said, her voice shaking with a mix of fear and defiance. I won't become like them. The man turned to face her again, his expression unreadable. You already are, he said softly, his words cutting through her like a blade. You just don't know it yet. She felt a cold knot form in her stomach. Was he right? Was she already part of this world, whether she liked it or not? She had tried to stay out of it, to hold on to the last remnants of the life she had known, but now, it felt like it was slipping through her fingers. What if I don't want this? She asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. What if I don't want to be part of your world? The man's eyes softened again, but there was no warmth in them. It's not a choice, Olivia. You belong here now. You belong to me. His words sent a chill down her spine, and for the first time, she felt truly powerless. There was no escaping. She was his now, trapped in this world that she couldn't understand, a world that was more dangerous than anything she had ever known. And as much as she wanted to run, she knew that there was no place left for her to go. Olivia woke up the next morning with a sense of unease settling deep within her chest. She had spent the night in a room that felt more like a cage than a sanctuary, the luxury of the space doing little to ease the anxiety swirling in her mind. The man, the one who had pulled her into this world, who had made it clear she was now part of his game, was still a mystery to her in many ways. His power, his control, seemed to stretch far beyond anything she had ever imagined. She had tried to convince herself that maybe, just maybe, she could find a way out, but the more she thought about it, the more hopeless the idea seemed. Every time she considered leaving, his words echoed in her mind. You're mine now. The gravity of that statement crushed her, pulling her deeper into the trap she had unwittingly stepped into. As the days went by, she began to feel like a mere pawn in his world. She couldn't shake the feeling that every move she made was being watched, calculated, as if she were part of a plan that she had no control over. The guards, the surveillance cameras, the ever-present men in dark suits, they were always there, ensuring she didn't do anything that might jeopardize his hold on her. But what was even more terrifying was the way the man had begun to weave his web around her. He had promised her protection, but she couldn't help but wonder what the price for that protection would be. Was she truly safe, or was she just being kept under control, under his watchful eye? The room she stayed in was isolated from the rest of the world. No phone calls, no visitors, no access to anything that could remind her of the life she once had. She was surrounded by luxury, yes, but it was the kind of luxury that felt like a gilded cage, trapping her in a life she didn't choose. The man had made it clear, her old life was gone. She was now part of his world, and there was no turning back. One afternoon, after days of feeling like a ghost in her own life, she was summoned to meet him again. She knew what that meant. He was going to ask something of her. She was certain of it. He always did. She walked down the long, sterile hallway to his office, her footsteps echoing in the silence. She had learned to keep her head down, to remain calm, even though every part of her wanted to scream. She reached the door to his office and knocked lightly, as she had been instructed. The door swung open almost immediately, and there he was, sitting behind his desk, looking as imposing as ever. His eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, there was something almost soft in them, something that suggested a fleeting moment of vulnerability. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by the cold, calculating gaze that had come to define him. "Come in," he said, his voice low and commanding as always. Olivia stepped inside, the door clicking shut behind her. Sit, he ordered, gesturing to the chair across from him. She did as she was told, not daring to defy him. She had learned the hard way that defiance didn't work in his world. You've been here for a while now, he began, his tone casual but with an underlying edge. And I think it's time for you to understand what's really at stake here. Olivia's heart skipped a beat. What was he talking about? She had no idea, but she knew it wouldn't be good. What do you mean? She asked, her voice trembling slightly despite her efforts to stay composed. He leaned forward, his fingers steepled in front of him. You're not just here for protection, Olivia. You're here because you have value. You have something that I need. Olivia's confusion deepened. I don't understand, she said quietly. What could I possibly have that you need? The man's eyes darkened. You're smarter than that, Olivia. Don't pretend you don't know. He paused for a moment, letting the words hang in the air. You're the key to something much bigger than you realize. And I'm going to make sure you understand your role in all of this. Olivia's stomach twisted into knots. What do you want me to do? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. That's for you to figure out, he said cryptically, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. You'll figure it out soon enough. Olivia felt a chill crawl up her spine. The more he spoke, the more she felt like she was being pulled into a deeper and darker web. She had no idea what kind of game he was playing, but she knew that whatever it was, she was caught in the middle of it. You're not just a pawn, Olivia, he said, his voice softening slightly. You're part of something much more important, something that has been in the works for a long time. Olivia felt a wave of dread wash over her. What had she gotten herself into? She had no answers, just questions. Endless questions that seemed to spiral deeper and deeper into uncertainty. But one thing was clear, she was a part of this now. There was no going back. You'll be safe as long as you follow my lead, he continued, his voice growing colder. But step out of line, and there will be consequences. Olivia swallowed hard. The man had made it clear, her life was no longer her own. She was part of his world now, and the only way to survive was to obey. But even as she nodded in agreement, a small, rebellious spark flickered in the back of her mind. She wasn't sure how much longer she could keep playing along, how much longer she could suppress the need to fight back. But for now, she had no choice. She was trapped, and he held the keys to her future. Olivia sat in the dimly lit room, staring at the floor, trying to process everything that had happened in the last few days. The man had made it clear, her life as she knew it was over. She was now part of his world, a world she didn't understand, and one she certainly didn't want to be part of. But there was no escaping it. The man's words echoed in her mind. You're mine now. It was a constant reminder that she had no control anymore. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped, of being swallowed up by a world of power and manipulation. The man had promised her safety, but she wasn't sure what that really meant. He hadn't explained much. She didn't know who he was, why he had taken such an interest in her, or what role she was supposed to play in all of this. All she knew was that she couldn't leave. He had made that clear. His world was a dangerous one, and the consequences of trying to escape were unimaginable. Olivia had spent the last few days locked in her room, pacing, trying to make sense of it all. She had no phone, no contact with the outside world. The walls felt like they were closing in on her. The only time she left the room was when he summoned her, which had become more frequent as the days went on. He would come to her room, speak to her in that cold, commanding tone, and then take her somewhere else. She never knew where, but it didn't matter. She wasn't allowed to question it. The man had created his own reality, and she was just a piece of it. The idea of being his prisoner was suffocating, but what choice did she have? One evening, after what felt like an eternity of silence and isolation, he came to her room again. He didn't knock this time, just opened the door and walked in, as if he owned every inch of the space. Olivia tensed at his presence, but she didn't speak. What was there to say? He had already taken everything from her, her freedom, her sense of safety, her life. It's time for you to start learning, he said, his voice low and smooth, as if he were talking about something insignificant. Learning what? Olivia's voice was hoarse, her throat dry from the constant knot of anxiety that twisted inside her. Learning your place in this world, he replied, his gaze never leaving her face. You're here for a reason, Olivia, and I'll make sure you understand what that reason is. She didn't want to know. She didn't want to play whatever game he was trying to force her into. But deep down, She knew it was too late. She was already involved. He stepped closer to her, the weight of his presence making her chest tighten. "I don't want to be a part of this," she said, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and anger. "I never asked for any of this." He smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes, and for a moment, Olivia saw a flicker of something darker in his expression. "You don't have to want it," he said softly. "You're already part of it. And now, you're going to learn how to navigate it." Olivia felt the ground beneath her feet shift as his words sank in. She had no choice but to play along. No matter how much she hated it, no matter how much she wanted to scream, she was trapped in his world. She was his now. He was the one with the power, the control, and she was nothing more than a pawn in his game. "You'll start by learning who your allies are," he continued, his voice more firm now, "and who your enemies are." Olivia wanted to argue, to refuse, but the look in his eyes told her there was no point. She had no power here. The realization was like a punch to the gut. "You'll need to be careful," he added, his tone shifting slightly, as if he were speaking to a child. "The people in my world don't play by the same rules as the rest of the world. They'll use you, manipulate you, if you let them. And I won't be there to protect you if you make the wrong moves." The weight of his words hung heavy in the air. Olivia wasn't sure if she could trust him, but at this point, trusting him was the only option left. She had to survive in this world, no matter how much it repulsed her. He stepped back, his eyes scanning her as if he were measuring her worth, determining what she could offer in return for his protection. Olivia fought to keep her expression neutral, to hide the fear and uncertainty that threatened to break through. "I'm not asking you to love this world," he said, his voice softening. "I'm asking you to learn it, to understand it. And then, you'll make your choice. But it has to be your choice, Olivia." The words were almost kind, but Olivia knew better than to believe them. They were a trap, like everything else he had said. She was being groomed for something, but she had no idea what. "You'll start your training tomorrow," he continued, his voice returning to its usual coldness. "Be ready." Olivia nodded silently, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. She didn't know if she was ready. She didn't know if she would ever be ready. But what choice did she have? She had been pulled into this world, and now she had to learn how to survive in it. The man turned to leave, his footsteps echoing in the silence of the room. Olivia watched him go, her heart sinking. This was her life now. She was part of his world, and there was no escaping it. No matter how hard she tried to fight, she knew that she was already lost. Olivia sat at the cold, polished desk in the small, dimly lit office, her mind still reeling from the last few months. Her hands rested on the surface, fingers tapping nervously as the man, the one who had changed everything for her, stood by the window, his silhouette outlined against the night sky. The city below seemed so far away, like a dream she once knew but couldn't quite reach anymore. She had been in his world for months now, and as much as she tried to deny it, she was starting to understand it. She had fought it every step of the way, but the reality was undeniable. She was part of it now. He had kept his promise, in a way. He had protected her, given her everything she could ever need, and even more than that, he had made sure she had power, power she never thought she could possess. But at what cost? Her old life, the life she had fought so hard to create, was gone. It felt like a distant memory, fading with each passing day. The man, whose name she still didn't fully understand, had turned her into someone she didn't recognize. Someone who played the game, who followed the rules, even though she hated every moment of it. She had come to understand that his world wasn't just about control, it was about survival. In his world, you either thrived, or you vanished, and she had no choice but to adapt. "You've done well, Olivia," he said, his voice cutting through her thoughts. He turned to face her, his expression calm, unreadable as always. "You've learned more in these months than most people learn in a lifetime." Olivia didn't respond. What could she say? She had learned how to move through his world, how to play the part. But the question still lingered in her mind. Had she lost herself in the process? Was she still the woman who had stepped into that Uber months ago, unsure of where it would lead? Or had she become something else entirely? "Do you regret it?" he asked, his eyes narrowing slightly as he studied her. The question surprised her. She had never heard him ask anything so personal. "Regret?" she repeated, her voice distant. "Regret what?" He stepped closer, his presence as commanding as ever. "Regret being part of this. Regret being mine. The words stung more than she expected, but she quickly masked it, forcing herself to look him in the eye. No, she said, though the word felt hollow as it left her lips. I don't regret it. He studied her for a moment longer before nodding, as if satisfied with her answer. He seemed to always know what she was thinking, what she was feeling. It was part of the game, she realized. He had to know everything to stay in control. Good, he said, his voice softer now. You're ready. Ready? Olivia's heart skipped a beat. Ready for what? He smiled, though it was a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Ready for what comes next. You've been a part of this world long enough now, Olivia. You've learned what you need to know. Olivia frowned, her mind racing. What are you talking about? He didn't answer her immediately. Instead, he turned back to the window, his back to her, looking out at the city below. This city, he said quietly, almost to himself, is a machine, Olivia. A machine that requires careful management, delicate manipulation, and complete control. I've built this empire, and now, it's time for you to take your place in it. Her stomach tightened. Take my place, she repeated, her voice almost a whisper. I thought I was already part of it. He turned back to her, his gaze steady. You are, he said, his voice firm. But now it's time for you to step up, to take on a bigger role. The realization hit her like a cold wave. She wasn't just a passive observer anymore. She wasn't just playing the game. She was being asked to lead, to become one of the key players in the empire he had built. And the thought terrified her. What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. What role do you want me to play? He walked over to the desk, placing his hands on the surface, leaning in slightly. I want you to be my right hand, he said, his voice low. I want you to help me lead this city. Help me expand our influence. Take control of what's left to conquer. Olivia felt the weight of his words. She could feel the gravity of the decision pressing down on her, the responsibility he was placing on her shoulders. She had always known this day would come, but she hadn't expected it to come so soon. She had become someone else in this world. She had learned how to survive. But now, he was asking her to take a step further. I can't, she said, the words slipping out before she could stop them. I can't do that. He didn't flinch, didn't seem surprised. Instead, he took a step closer to her, his expression softening just slightly. You can, and you will. Because in this world, there's no going back, Olivia. There's only moving forward. The words hung in the air between them, thick with finality. Olivia swallowed hard, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew he was right. There was no going back. She had already crossed that line. She had already chosen to stay, to be part of his world. But now, she was being asked to choose again. And this time, the choice was even harder. The reality of it sank in. She wasn't just trapped anymore. She was in control of her own fate in a world that had always been about power and control. She had learned how to survive. Now, she would learn how to thrive. And the man standing before her had just made it clear, there was no turning back. She had no choice but to accept the path he had set before her. Olivia was part of this world. Now, and she had a new role to play in it. The question was no longer whether she would fight for her freedom. The question was whether she could learn to wield the power she had been given and survive in the dangerous game he had created. In this dark romance, a simple Uber ride turns into a life-altering journey for Olivia as she finds herself caught in the web of a powerful, dangerous man. Unbeknownst to her, the stranger she shared a ride with is the most feared Mafia boss in the city, and she quickly becomes a key player in his world of control and power. As Olivia struggles to adjust to her new reality, she realizes there is no escaping this dark romance world where manipulation and loyalty go hand in hand. With every passing day, Olivia is drawn deeper into his world, where survival means surrendering to the game of power and control. She must navigate the twists and turns of this dark romance, questioning her place, her choices, and the future that lies ahead. As the tension builds, Olivia faces a decision. Accept her role in this dangerous world or fight to break free, knowing full well the consequences could be deadly. This dark romance will take you on a thrilling ride filled with secrets, danger, and the unspoken connections that bind the characters together in a game that's both irresistible and dangerous.